it's quiet on the set. And the graphic is up. Quiet on the set.
Welcome back to episode 3 of Kaito Media. As you are aware, we are going to start off this episode right where we left off at 2. Right at the camp hinted about the myth. The Shady Side myth is the witch. The myth is about a witch who had cursed the whole land of Shady Side as she died a gruesome death. Seraphine seeked for vengeance as her unjustified death, as everyone who sees the proclaimed witch is to go mad and insane as she consumes the mind of Shady Town folks. Though you might want to pay close attention when watching part 1 and part 2 when we get more information on the curse of the witch Seraphine. We get introduced to the killer of the movies.
What's going on? Sorry.
Okay. Now, how are the killers in this movie or this series any different from our typical serial killers? Or how can they even top our favorite killers, being Ghostface, Jason, Michael Myers, or even Art the Clown? How different are they? How original are their backstories? How can they provide any interest to the story and to the audience? You've told us we go back in time and stuff, but are the killers really that different from your typical killers? Or at least outstanding than the most typical serial killer in any series? Like, for example, Mousetrap and the Killer Pooh, they kind of were the same, but they never really had anything interesting to give to the story. So how can these killers captivate us, the audience, into wanting to watch this, or even like enjoy the movie to the fullest without having the same repeat of your typical horror movie or your horror film where it's always, oh, the killer had a bad story and they just kill to get revenge? What's the difference from your typical horror story? Well, just think about it. What makes them more eye-catching? What's the difference, or what is something that makes them outstanding or even more believable?
To the very last, the beginning of the messy Shady Side tragedy. We start off with a pastor. The pastor was kind of in charge of the small village in Fear Street, Part 3, 1666. We get sent back in time once again, yet this time we see how it originally starts. Without giving out exactly what happens to Cyrus Miller, the pastor of the town, was the very first victim of Shady Side's mysterious killing. As for he was a bit more unexpected, as he starts off showing signs of mumbling and no one really could understand what he was saying or what he was trying to entail. As we see his unusual pattern, we see one important factor that he holds. Now, knowing that this is lingering around, there isn't much that people notice that their food supply or any of their supply has taken a turn to the worse. You'll soon get to see that weird urge when you look closely in the background as you notice the small things off with the children in the village. Boom. They're the first victims of the witch. Next is the grifter. Year 1904. You'll get a sneak peek of his story, as he's the second to fall victim of the curse, as it's shown that the grifter would drown all his female victims to death. It was never really shown any type of emotion, as the mask that covered his face. It's supposedly a combination of a medieval plague doctor and Pyramid Head from Silent Hills franchise. The next victim being, as well, Billy Baker, a much younger, if not the youngest killer yet. Billy killed off his younger brother as soon as he became Shady Side's next victim, which people soon saw that absolutely no one was truly spared from the witch's anger. And he was kind of supposed to resemble as well a bit of Michael Myers with his mask. Soon after, we go to Harry Rooker, 1950 through 53, the milkman. He was a killer. We get a glimpse of how he did his murders. As well, it focused on how he mostly killed housewives with a switchblade. He was labeled the most brutal one, as he was the one seen with much potential in Fear Street. He also plays an important part as we meet the main characters in Fear Street Part 2 and in Part 2, with the two sisters who find the cursed object and the unbelieving of the myth behind thinking that they had ended it completely. Well, he's supposed to reminisce a bit of Freddy Krueger in a way of Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, as we move on to Ruby Lane, 1965, she's one of my personal favorites, as she's a character developed very well, as she looks very original and normal. You wouldn't suspect a single thing about her. She sings this song, you always hurt the ones you love, as she gets controlled by the curse and falls yet into another Shady Side's victim. As she's a character, it's more based off an updated version of the Night of the Living Dead. She's also known as the Angry Princess, as she's the main target of the Shady slashers, as her mother, Nurse Mary Lane, as well, has more information to her backstory. Next up is our famous Tommy Slater, a camp Nightwing killer, 1978. Tommy being the most recent of the Shady Side God Mad, as he was in the camp in Part 2, holding an axe as he ran around the camp without a noise, killing almost half of the entire camp. Yet his story ties to all three of the parts together in one. You watch as he snaps. Tommy is also described to have a Camp Crystal Lake parallels with Friday the 13th, which is also presented to be Tommy wearing the sack over his head, covering his face completely. Yet, as we get to the last one, we meet Ryan Torres. He's also shown to be a regular teenager as he interacts with Heather, who we see is closing up the mall, as Ryan soon takes a bloodlusting massacre as he wears a skull-like mask, killing Heather, that being the start of the Shady Side victim of the witch's curse. He is shown to have the skull mask, as it was said to be, in terms of inspiration, skull mask drawn heavily was masked with slasher villain like Halloween, Michael Myers, and Friday the 13th. Now, for a small break, as I lay all this information on you guys, today's little sponsor is Mini Buddy. If you ever felt scared or you ever went like places alone, I would highly recommend getting one of these. They look small and stupid, but honestly, they're very helpful. Even in like movie theaters or if you get really scared at movie theaters, they're they're portable. You can carry them everywhere, and they're not a safety hazard. So, and they're cheap. They're like, I got like 2 for like $5. So if anything, and you don't like going out alone or you're not really the people type, I would advise getting one. All right. Now, as I close up this episode, we get to know a bit about the killers, as well as how much they played a role and the inspiration they were given from. Now, I would highly suggest watching the movie, all 3 parts, as it goes much more in depth of their origin stories and how they go mad. And yeah, for our next episode, we will be covering the sequel as we kind of get a glimpse and see what happens in Part 4. As I wrap this up without giving too much spoilers on our next episode, I want to say thank you for watching Kaito Media.
Good to go. Switch to camera one. Camera one.
Hi, my name is Peyton, and welcome back to the show From Start to Finish, a show discussing an aspect of gaming known as speedrunning. Today's episode is episode 2, and in the last episode, I introduced you to the concept of speedrunning. You got to learn some basic terminology and gather some understanding of what it is and why it is something people enjoy, as well as getting to see some examples of what top speedruns look like. Today will be a bit more focused on explaining the deeper mechanics and showing how each section of the game is broken down. Right away, I'd like to segue into a video where I'll be personally demonstrating the first 2 kingdoms of Super Mario Odyssey and explaining the tricks that are used. Please take a look. Hi, welcome to the video segment for episode 2 of From Start to Finish. Today I will be performing a section of the game I know most well in speedrunning, being Super Mario Odyssey, and as well as explaining some of the tricks and techniques that are discovered and used in the run as I perform them. So this is the start of the game. If you were performing a speedrun, the second you select New Game here, the timer would start. Another question you might think immediately is the game is in Chinese. That is because that is the fastest language. It is very common in speedrunning for people to discover what language scrolls by the fastest or has the least amount of spoken dialogue. Anything you can do to save just those few extra seconds, because if you can do it for free by just selecting an option, why wouldn't you? So right off the bat, we skip the opening cutscene. And in this intro sequence of the game, you need to wait for Mario to wake up before you can start moving. Immediately, we move the camera down because the game requires you do that anyways. And that just ensures that you can start as fast as possible. Now in Mario Odyssey, the fastest form of movement is rolling, which unfortunately does demand motion controls of shaking the controller, which can get tiring across the course of an entire run. Alright, so immediately in this room, there are two techniques we'll be utilizing. One is called a spin pound buffer, which sounds complicated, but essentially, when you go to initiate a roll as Mario, which is the fastest form of movement, you can also ground pound prior, which gives you a boost when you start. However, the ground pound animation, as it is, takes a little bit, too long. A faster way to do that is if you spin the control stick at least twice, Mario will spin, which basically means if you input the ground pound, you can skip the animation, which just takes less time. However, spinning the control stick to make Mario spin also takes time. However, during certain loading screens, like this one for example, if we were to leave the area, if you spin the control stick, he will immediately be spinning the second you enter the next area. During certain loading screens, it's very important across the entire course of the run to learn this trick, where you can save a little bit of time to get that extra boost without needing to do any of the animation. Another trick I'll be using in the next room is called vectoring, when I become one of the frogs for the platforming section. There's a trick known as vectoring, which is kind of hard to explain, but essentially in 3D platforming games, a lot of them, I should say, if you curve your character, it will accelerate your character in a way to make the game more approachable for beginners and feel better. However, in speedrunning, you can actually abuse this, especially as the frogs. It's very easy to tell because they jump so much higher than the base character. You'll notice instead of just jumping straight, I actually jump right or left and then curve towards the target. And this buys a lot more time than you would think. So I will perform this frog run section now. So spin pound buffer. Skip the cutscene. So right here is where I demonstrate the vectoring. And even though that looks bad, that saves a considerable amount of time. Then here we'll spin pound buffer once more as we make our way to the boss fight of the first area. And there's the boss fight. Now, during this cutscene, there is a single frame where if you are inputting the jump button, Mario will slightly jump ahead of time. Saves probably 1 frame of gameplay. Alright, there's the first moon. After this short cutscene, you'll notice when I make my way to the bridge, I actually go to the left and bump into a rock purposefully. This triggers the next cutscene ever so slightly sooner than if you were to go straight at it, for whatever reason. The next trick I will be performing is one that is a common favorite among speedrunners, known as Dino Skip. In a moment after doing a jump, there will be a dinosaur you take control of, and using a trampoline, which is not intended to be used with it, if you step on it in a particular way, you can jump the controlled dinosaur up to the boss fight at the end of the kingdom, skipping nearly the entire kingdom with one jump, going straight to the boss. Alright, and we've arrived at the boss fight. And that is the entirety of Cascade completed, except for one extra moon we have to grab before we can progress to the next kingdom. And then we'll perform one last quick jump here to get a moon that's very close by to where this is right here. And that is 2 kingdoms of the game already done. The next kingdom in the game is Sand Kingdom. I will be sure to show off this kingdom as well as the future kingdoms that come after it in the next episode of From Start to Finish. I hope you enjoyed the rest of this episode.
Okay. Now, how...
The prompter. Now, you've seen some of the more nuanced mechanics that go into optimizing a run and just how much goes into saving every little bit of time possible. From changing the game's language, to using the loading screens to input moves ahead of time, abusing where certain cutscenes trigger, or even using split-second openings in a cutscene just to complete what appears to be not even a quarter of a full jump ahead of time. Although these may seem trivial, and sometimes outright ridiculous, little openings and tools like this add up to significant amounts of time by the end of the run. It's tricks like this that may not be as flashy as others that really make speedrunning as challenging as it is. Now, I'd like to give a word from today's sponsor, Red Bull. With a wide range of flavors and sugar-free options, there's sure to be an option you'll like. Whether you're at work, studying, or trying to get that new speedrun PB, Red Bull has the energy formula to keep you focused and help you through. And with that, I'll wrap it up here. Next episode, I'll have another video going through another segment of the game and showing more new tricks, including one where we clip out of the map, as well as one where you set your system clock to a certain time before the run even starts so you can use daylight savings time to your advantage. I hope you look forward to the next episode, and I hope you enjoyed this one from start to finish.
Okay. See how it works? You gotta get everything set up. Then